They told you wealth was hard, that it required talent, connections, luck, or divine timing, a perfect alignment of forces outside your control. You believed it, because everyone around you seemed to struggle, to grind, to suffer. And yet, behind that noise of exhaustion, a small elite moves quietly, effortlessly, bending rules that others are too tired to notice. You've probably asked yourself at some point, why does it feel like the game is rigged? You work harder. You care more. You stay honest, and still your reward is delay. They call it patience. But what if that patience was engineered? A leash disguised as virtue. Machiavelli understood this centuries ago. He saw how power thrives not by force, but by illusion, by convincing the masses that difficulty equals morality and that waiting is wisdom. But here's the truth they'll never teach in school. Getting rich is not hard. It's hidden. It was designed to look hard, so that those who learn how it actually works never face competition. The real game is not about effort. It's about awareness. The poor fight visible battles. The rich master invisible ones. And here's the first invisible rule. Wealth flows where perception is controlled, not where work is done. Because work without narrative is invisible, and in a world obsessed with appearances, invisibility is poverty. Think about it. Every empire, every corporation, every influencer, they don't just sell a product, they sell belief, the illusion of inevitability. That's the first Machiavellian principle of wealth. Appear as if success was inevitable, and the world will rearrange itself to make it so. You were raised to believe in fairness, but fairness is the most elegant form of control ever invented. It convinces people to stay calm while being exploited, to trust systems designed to drain them slowly. Fairness makes the worker obey, because if the system is fair, then failure must be your fault. You blame yourself. You double your effort. You try to prove your worth. And while you chase validation, those above you quietly accumulate power, not through morality, but through positioning. Machiavelli called this virtue, not virtue as goodness, but virtue as effectiveness. The ability to adapt, to manipulate appearances, to act decisively when others hesitate. In his world, morality was optional, awareness was essential, and in ours, nothing has changed. You don't lose money because you're lazy. You lose it because you've been trained to think like a follower. You wait for permission. You wait for fairness. You wait for recognition. Meanwhile, those who understand human behavior are engineering your emotions in real time, through algorithms, markets, trends, and stories. They know exactly what you fear. They know when to make you panic, when to make you hopeful, when to make you spend. You think you're reacting freely. You're not. You're dancing to psychological strings pulled by those who read Machiavelli better than you ever will. But this is not a message of despair. It's an awakening, because once you see the manipulation, it loses its grip. Once you stop reacting emotionally, you start maneuvering strategically, and that's when money, real, scalable, quiet wealth, begins to flow toward you. You don't need to work harder. You need to work colder, to see emotion as data, to see systems as games, to detach enough to understand that human nature, not effort, drives every market, every fortune, every empire. You've been told to be passionate, but passion blinds. It makes you predictable. The Machiavellian mind stays calm in chaos because it knows chaos is a stage, not a storm. When others panic, he positions. When others talk, he listens. When others seek approval, he builds leverage. That's the second invisible rule. The less you reveal, the more power you have. Transparency is the myth of the powerless, a performance to keep them trustworthy, while the truly powerful remain unreadable. You cannot be manipulated if no one can predict your emotional triggers. You cannot be defeated if no one understands your timing. The world rewards visibility only when it profits from it. They tell you to share your journey, but they only reward the illusion of struggle, not the mastery behind it. The ones who rise don't document every step. They appear fully formed, because the human mind worships certainty, not process. Machiavelli warned rulers never to let others see their entire design. Reveal just enough to inspire loyalty, but never enough to reveal dependency. That's how kings ruled courts, and how billionaires rule markets. You think you need money to get rich. But wealth doesn't start with capital, it starts with narrative. Because the moment people believe you represent value, they create it for you. That's how brands are born, how reputations grow, how empires start in silence. So stop waiting for proof. Start building perception. Stop showing your effort. Start showing inevitability. Because no one invests in potential, they invest in certainty. You were trained to ask, how do I deserve success? The Machiavellian mind asks, how do I appear inevitable to those who decide success? That's not deception. That's psychology. And in a world governed by attention, perception is the only currency that multiplies without limit. Look around. The people who rise aren't necessarily the best. They are the ones who control the narrative of their worth. The ones who know when to stay silent, when to strike, when to vanish. Powerful people don't compete. They design the rules. They don't fight for the spotlight, they own the stage. You've probably heard the phrase, knowledge is power. It's wrong. Controlled knowledge is power. Because information without strategy only breeds noise. The poor are drowning in advice. The rich pay for perspective. And that brings us to the third invisible rule. Wealth moves toward emotional mastery. The calmest person in the room always wins. Because calmness signals control, and control magnetizes trust. Markets, investors, partners, even enemies. They all gravitate toward whoever seems unshakable. Machiavelli said that a prince should be both loved and feared. But if he cannot be both, it's safer to be feared. In modern terms, it means respect is worth more than relatability. People trust strength more than sincerity. They follow confidence even when it's empty, because human nature craves hierarchy. Think of every negotiation you've ever lost. It wasn't because you lacked intelligence. It was because the other person made you feel uncertain. They controlled the tempo, the pauses, the silence. And in that silence, you gave away power. Money follows the same law. It flows toward composure, not confusion. It seeks leaders, not laborers. And in every system, from politics to business, the rich understand one thing. You cannot outperform someone who plays a different game. You're still trying to win by effort. They're winning by perception. You measure time. They measure influence. You chase opportunity. They design scarcity. And while you're taught to compete, they collaborate, not out of kindness, but strategy. Because wealth isn't competition, it's architecture. A structure of belief built around perception and timing. And once you understand that architecture, everything changes. The poor build effort. The rich build leverage. Effort ends when you stop working. Leverage works while you sleep. That's not motivational fluff. That's mechanical truth. But to create leverage, you must first become emotionally detached. The man who needs validation can never control perception. The woman who fears rejection can never command attention. Machiavelli would say, a prince who depends on the loyalty of others will fall when loyalty fades. Translated to today, if your confidence depends on approval, your power belongs to the crowd. So ask yourself, who owns your emotions? When the market drops, when your boss criticizes you, when someone ignores your value, who decides how you feel? If the answer isn't you, then someone else owns your future. Every time you explain yourself to people who doubt you, you lose power. Every time you seek validation from those below your vision, you donate leverage. The rich stay silent because silence terrifies the uncertain. In silence, they project authority. In silence, they multiply value. The truth is simple but brutal. Most people don't want freedom. They want comfort. Freedom demands strategy. Comfort rewards obedience. And systems thrive on obedient workers, tired enough to be loyal, moral enough to feel proud, and poor enough to stay dependent. That's why you must choose between fairness and freedom. Because you can't have both. Fairness is stability. Freedom is volatility. And only those who embrace volatility ever escape control. Machiavelli would tell you, Fortune favors the bold. But boldness doesn't mean recklessness. It means making moves when others freeze, acting with clarity when the crowd panics. That's how power is seized. Not by asking, but by acting when others wait. When you stop waiting for luck, you begin manufacturing it. Luck is simply timing, and timing belongs to those who study emotion, not events. They watch the crowd's rhythm, not the market's numbers. Because emotion predicts behavior, and behavior predicts opportunity. The poor watch news, the rich watch reactions. The poor follow trends, the rich trigger them. That's the essence of Machiavellian wealth. Predict emotion, and you predict fortune. Pause here and breathe. If you're feeling resistance, it's natural. Everything you've been taught was designed to make this truth uncomfortable, because awareness is the first step toward detachment, and detachment is dangerous to those who depend on your obedience. Now imagine this. You wake up tomorrow, and instead of checking who approves of you, you observe who reacts to you. Instead of chasing opportunity, you start studying behavior. You begin to see the patterns of emotion that move everything: markets, people, power. That's when you stop surviving and start maneuvering. Because getting rich is not about luck or work. It's about rhythm, the rhythm of human nature. And once you learn its beat, you'll move unseen, unstoppable, and unshakable. When the illusion of difficulty collapses, something terrifying happens. You realize there was never a wall, only a veil. And once the veil is lifted, you can't unsee it. You begin to notice how easy the game actually is once you understand its psychology. That's why most people never cross this point, because simplicity, once revealed, feels dangerous. We are raised to worship struggle. We equate exhaustion with worth and confusion with humility. It's the perfect trap. A tired mind is easy to manipulate, and a humble heart rarely questions authority. Machiavelli warned rulers of this centuries ago to keep citizens busy with virtue so they never learn strategy. The world still uses that trick. They call it hustle culture. They glorify the man who never sleeps, who works harder than everyone else. But that man rarely controls his life. He only fuels someone else's empire. The powerful don't compete in hours. They compete in leverage. Because you can't beat a game that rewards those who built the rules. Look at your daily life. Every time you rush, panic, explain, or justify, you're leaking value. Every time you chase approval, you reinforce someone else's throne. Wealth begins not with work, but with stillness. Not laziness on stillness. The pause that lets you see patterns others miss. That's why calmness is the most underrated financial weapon in history. Machiavelli would call it calculated virtue, appearing composed while quietly adjusting the chessboard. He knew that perception shapes reality faster than force ever could. In our world, that translates into understanding markets, people, timing, not emotionally, but mechanically. The crowd reacts. The rich observe. The crowd argues. The rich anticipate. Every crisis, every panic, every collective outrage, it's all just emotional noise waiting for someone cold enough to capitalize on it. That's how fortunes are made, in the silence between reactions. So the question isn't, how much can you work? It's how little can you react? Because reaction is the currency of the powerless. They spend emotion on everything. The powerful conserve it like gold. Start observing this in daily life. Someone insults you. Observe instead of defending. Someone flaunts success. Analyze instead of envying. Every moment you withhold emotion, you gain information. And information is leverage. That's how Machiavellian wealth operates. Quietly, invisibly, psychologically. You don't fight the world. You let the world reveal itself. And then you position yourself where its weakness becomes your advantage. Take modern finance as an example. Most people chase trends because they crave belonging. They buy when everyone else buys, and panic when everyone else panics. But the strategist moves opposite emotion. He buys when fear peaks and sells when greed blinds. That's not luck. It's behavioral geometry. Machiavelli would say, "He who builds on the people builds on mud," meaning, never base your foundation on emotion or approval. Base it on predictability, and nothing is more predictable than human weakness. You don't need millions to begin, you need pattern recognition. Start small. Notice what people seek, what they fear, what they imitate. Behind every market lies a collective insecurity. Behind every fortune lies someone who understood that insecurity before others did. Wealth doesn't punish the slow, it punishes the unaware. And awareness begins when you stop treating money as moral. Money is energy, neutral, obedient, and responsive to clarity. It goes where certainty lives. If you appear uncertain, it avoids you. This is why the calmest minds build empires. They don't shout, they signal. They don't beg, they broadcast inevitability. That's why confidence, real or constructed, is the most valuable illusion you can master. Confidence isn't arrogance, it's clarity expressed through rhythm. It's the tone that tells others, "I don't need your permission." And that tone rewires perception faster than logic ever could. Machiavelli taught rulers to appear merciful, faithful, humane, and religious, but to remain ready to act against all of them when necessary. Translated today, appear ethical, but be strategic. Appear generous, but calculate gain. Appear transparent, but never reveal your map. That duality isn't hypocrisy, it's armor. Wealth requires duality. You must be kind but unreadable, generous but untouchable, visible but invulnerable. That's how power survives in modern society, by blending moral comfort with silent control. Pause for a second. You might feel resistance, Gun. The moral voice whispering, but isn't that manipulation? No. Manipulation exploits ignorance. Strategy manages inevitability. You're not deceiving anyone, you're simply refusing to be deceived. Every major religion, government, and corporation practices this already. They just wrap it in nicer language. They sell dreams, control attention, and call it progress. Meanwhile, they accumulate wealth by engineering belief. If you learn the architecture of belief, you join them, not as a victim, but as an architect. Belief is the currency of the 21st century. People pay for what they already want to believe. They crave certainty, identity, belonging. Give them that, ethically, intelligently, and you'll never worry about money again. So how do you use this knowledge without losing your soul? Simple. Stop trying to please everyone. Machiavelli would remind you, those who try to please all end up powerless. You don't need universal approval, you need selective respect. Respect from the right minds creates the bridges that wealth walks across. When you speak, speak with precision. When you act, act decisively. When you build, build quietly until it's too late for anyone to stop it. The more predictable your behavior, the easier you are to control. So train yourself to be unreadable. Not mysterious for ego's sake, but strategic for survival. Think of influence as gravity. You don't chase it, you create mass so it attracts. Mass in modern terms means credibility, consistency, and composure. When those align, money orbits you automatically. Machiavelli's princes never begged for loyalty. They engineered dependence. In our world, dependence looks like ecosystems. The influencer's followers, the entrepreneur's customers, the investor's networks. All different words for the same mechanism, controlled attention. So the fourth invisible rule of wealth is this: build systems that depend on you less than you depend on them. Because freedom isn't having everything, it's needing nothing. The truly rich aren't those who own the most, but those who can walk away at any time. Every empire collapses the moment its ruler becomes emotionally attached to its image. That's why you must stay fluid. Adapt identities as easily as markets adapt prices. The rich aren't rigid, they are liquid. They dissolve and reform according to opportunity. Let's make this real. Start replacing explanations with pauses. Replace speed with timing. Replace competition with design. Every silence you hold multiplies your perceived value. Every delay you control builds anticipation, the most powerful magnet in psychology. Scarcity moves desire. Desire moves money. So make your present scarce, your words deliberate, your results visible but never explained. You don't need to prove worth. You need to create curiosity. Machiavelli said men judge generally more by the eye than by the hand, for everyone can see but few can feel. That's the secret. People trust what they perceive more than what they experience. So shape perception, and reality follows. If this sounds cold, remember, it's only cold to those still burning for approval. Once you've tasted clarity, warmth becomes distraction. Peace becomes leverage. This is where your transformation begins. You stop reacting. You start designing. You stop hustling. You start positioning. You stop asking, how do I earn more? And start asking, how do I become too essential to ignore? Wealth will follow, not as a reward, but as a consequence. Because fortune doesn't chase the desperate, it gravitates to the decisive. So what does this look like in practice? 3 rules. First, learn the art of controlled visibility. Show results, not progress. People don't respect your process. They respect what looks finished. Master illusion, not transparency. Second, build asymmetric relationships. Offer value that costs you little but means everything to others. Information, emotion, perspective. These are currencies that scale infinitely. Third, protect your inner stillness at all costs. Every distraction is taxation on your focus. The world profits from your attention. Starve it. The more silent you become, the more expensive your presence feels. And that's the ultimate paradox. Silence makes noise obey you. Stillness turns chaos into rhythm. That's why Machiavelli's wisdom still reigns today. Control perception, and you control destiny. Now, let me ask you something. What part of you still obeys the illusion? What part of you still believes that morality must precede success? That humility guarantees reward? That patience is always noble? Those were chains disguised as principles. Break them, not by anger, but by understanding. And once they fall, you'll feel something new. Peace that earns. You don't need permission to be powerful. You don't need luck to be wealthy. You just need to stop apologizing for clarity. This channel isn't for followers. It's for strategists. You've already begun your transformation. Don't stop now. Subscribe. And stay 2 moves ahead of those still playing by old rules. Comment below what part of you still obeys the illusion, and which part is ready to rule it. The next video will not teach you how to earn more. It will teach you how to become untouchable.